Hello, good afternoon. This is Penelope Weinberger from AASHTO. We're having take two of a very interesting and very well attended, or certainly there was a lot of interest in this webinar on from GOTUG, which we will get into the details of it shortly. I just wanted to let you know that we're not going to start off right at this instant. We're going to start off in a minute or two. But first, if people are on the phone and listening, can anybody chat me either in chat or in questions that they can hear me? Because I know there were some problems with that last time, and I want to make sure that we have a good audio connection before we go forward. I can hear you fine, thanks. Thank you, Edgar. That's great. I'll take it as if one person can hear me, everyone can hear me. So we're just going to start in a couple of minutes. I'm just going to go over the regular housekeeping, which is that everyone is in listen-only mode who's attending, but you're certainly welcome to type in your questions at any time, and I will read them aloud. Becky and Adrian, our panelists today, will answer questions about their presentations. Of course, you can always ask questions about the program as well. This webinar will be recorded, is being recorded even from now, and we'll post it on the GOTUG website after it is finished and wrapped up, and we have all the presentations to put together with it. So it is 1:01 p.m. Eastern. I think we're going to start at 1:03 p.m. We'll give people 2 more minutes to roll on in, and it looks like we're doing good with attendees. So we'll just be starting in a couple minutes. Actually, I guess I'll go ahead and start now since we're doing all the pro forma stuff, and now we'll get done, and then we'll get on to the presentations, which is what people are really here for. So again, I'm Penelope Weinberger. I work for AASHTO. I'm here to introduce this webinar today, the Geospatial Online Transportation Users Group GOTUG webinar. And our agenda today is that we'll have this welcome and overview of the program. We're going to have 2 technical presentations today. One is using GIS to advance digital delivery at Utah DOT, and we'll have a Q&A for that. And then we're going to do e-ticketing for HMA and PCC and a Q&A for that. So we just want to remind you that when we give these webinars, it's to give information to the user community, and that AASHTO does not endorse or promote any brand of products or any products in particular. These webinars are for information sharing purposes and are open to all tools. So if anyone is interested in presenting or has an idea for a webinar topic, please contact me or Jeremy Acock, the chair of GOTUG, and we'll do a webinar on that tool. A little bit of history on GOTUG. Jeremy Acock is the chair, as I mentioned. I'm the AASHTO liaison. There are some steering committee members, Eric Abrams, Andrew Wimsatt, Nicole Hansen, and Mark Sarmiento of the Federal Highway Administration. And we're a little slight on our steering committee now, so if you're interested in joining leadership for GOTUG and you're at a state DOT, please shoot me an email and let me know that you'd like to help plan some of these webinars and some of the activities that GOTUG does. GOTUG is the Geospatial Online Transportation Users Group. It began as an AASHTO innovation initiative initiated by Utah DOT, who are both of our participants today from Utah DOT. The project was a working group under the Standing Committee on Planning, Subcommittee on Data, and the Subcommittee on Data was dissolved and became the Committee on Data Management and Analytics, actually much larger than the Subcommittee on Data because it is a full committee of AASHTO. And GOTUG is under the technical services group of that committee. The steering committee, I just went over before, so that's a duplicate on the slide. So why do we do GOTUG? Why do we have the Geospatial Online Transportation User Group? It is to maintain the momentum started with UPlan and the AASHTO Innovation Initiatives, and it marries business needs with innovative web-based geospatial solutions, and it provides information to the user community. So some of our resources, our technical resources are the GOTUG website and our distribution list that you can forward to friends so that you can be notified of interesting webinars and happenings that are coming up. We send out bulletins, information, and we do webinar services. And AASHTO Data Committee resources are the AASHTO Data website. We use the Data Committee to increase the visibility of Geographical Information Systems, GIS, and geospatial data issues. It's a technical resource group for all AASHTO members. So after this webinar, we're going to have a webinar next month. We usually have them every 3 months, once a quarter, but since this one got delayed until today, we're having one next month, and that will be the preview of survey results, which is a little bit of a teaser What we're going to talk about on that webinar is our upcoming GIST, the Geographic Information Systems and Transportation Annual Conference, which is taking place in Minneapolis, Minnesota, April 14th to 17th. We do a big survey. We review. We do a roll call of the states. We ask them about their GIS initiatives. We're asking them about their GIS maturity this year, and we should have some very interesting results from that survey. So we're going to give a preview of that. And then in June 3rd, we'll be back with another technical webinar on UAV and drones. So I'd like to turn the controls over to Becky Gill from the Utah DOT. She's going to talk about using GIS to advance digital delivery at Utah DOT. So take it away, Becky.
Okay, thanks, Penelope. Thanks everyone for joining. I hope everyone can see my screen. I'm doing this webinar from home today. I have a bad cold. If I suddenly go silent, I am just coughing and I've muted myself, but I will return. This part of this presentation is very high level. There's not a lot of real technical information in it, but it provides an overview of what we're doing at Utah DOT. So I'm going to talk a little bit about digital delivery, how it evolved and where it's at today, what some of our goals are for it, what it means to us, and how we're incorporating GIS. I'm going to touch on a federal aid grant that we received and how we're putting that money to work, some of our pilot projects, some of the issues, of course. It wouldn't be a presentation at all without some issues that we had to face with technology and where we're headed in the future. So starting off, I just wanted to provide this quick view of what we're doing. So digital delivery at UDOT really started with model-based design and construction. That's using the model to convey the design intent to construction, passing the model directly to construction without creating plan sheets. And we refer to that as MALD, M-A-L-D, using the model as the legal document is what it stands for. And we started on very simple, low-risk projects as kind of low complexity and low risk, and we've moved into some more complex projects with some different delivery methods. Okay. So we have, using the model as a legal document, we have completed 11 awards, or 11 projects have been awarded. 7 have been fully constructed. That means without any sheets, just passing the model from design to construction. We have 1 that is totally complete, and 1 bridge project that is in construction right now. So we've run into some technology issues, as you can imagine, trying to pass the model straight to contractors. I apologize, I'm having a hard time moving my slides forward without opening the webinar window. So the evolution of digital delivery has gone from using the model as legal document to how do we transfer that data, right? So we're running into issues with the contractor not being able to read what is in the DGN files that we provide or the iModels that we've provided that you saw in the last graphic. And what we've focused on here with our aid grant is really how do we move the data from design to construction and beyond, bringing information from construction forward for the future. So about a year ago, UDOT was awarded, maybe more than a year ago, UDOT received a $1 million aid grant, and we're putting that money to work on this project. It's really the focus is this huge paradigm shift, moving away from sheets in the field to a fully digital process, which transforms the data into something that can be used in the field, and then something that can populate our business systems in the future. The high-level reasons that UDOT made a decision to invest in this is that we are hoping to produce a more optimal design, a design that has, it's much tighter and much more fully developed, so we have fewer questions when we get to construction, and hopefully less questions during bidding. We hope we improve the information transfer by making it move from model to model and not having everybody redevelop the model or the data at every stage. We want to obtain and manage data to improve decision making. This is one of the key things that we haven't seen in our projects that we've done. The first 11 pilots that I mentioned earlier in the very beginning, those were successful. Each was successful in its own right, but it did not create consistency, a consistent process that could be repeated from project to project. And that's what we're hoping to do with this managing the data, so we can save it or preserve what's needed or relevant for future decision making or even current decision making. We really struggle with as-built information at the end of a project. I'm not sure, but I expect that's a problem across agencies. And it's just a general overall improved efficiency. So our aid grant, this is what we're planning to do. This is what we are doing today. We have created a baseline workspace for designers. That means that we have overhauled our Bentley Open Roads Designer workspace so that it's organized to pass data forward to construction. We met with some of our downstream users in traffic and safety to gather requirements for relevant data that they need at the end of a construction project to help make decisions about safety and managing their assets. And we built those attributes into our workspace so that they can be populated either from our asset data that we collect every other year or through construction using tools in the field. We've created updated naming conventions. There's been a lot of work just in process change and building repeatability so that we can have a consistent deliverable from design to construction. So that when we started this work, we sat down with our contractors and we said, what is it that you need from design to do your work? And we talked to traffic and safety and we said, what do you need after construction to do your work? And we use those requirements to create some repeatable processes that I'm going to talk about as we move forward through this presentation. So our aid grant team is really big. Kimley Horn is the prime. We have Avenue, Horrocks, HDR, Ralph Wadsworth, and WW Clyde are the two contractors on the team, and we've added a couple of other consulting firms coming in to help with areas of our workspace that we weren't sure we would get to, but we've made enough progress that we are moving into drainage. So we have Lochner working on drainage, and Michael Baker is going to be working on structures for us. Our digital delivery aid grant pilot projects, we basically have a list of projects here that are either starting today or will be starting soon. So we're working on the BL indicates this new baseline workspace that will help pass data forward, and the green circles indicate that we're working on viewer applications for our two projects that are getting ready to start pretty soon, which are Mid-Valley and Baker Canyon. I think I-80 is actually much closer at this point than we thought. So I've talked a lot about what we're doing with Bentley software and what we're doing in design to pass information forward, but I haven't really touched on where GIS fits, which is the whole point of this webinar. So our current approach is really just focused on 2D. We do all our work in 3D, but we're really focusing on 2D for civil elements because our GIS field tools don't really support 3D visualization right now, and 3D isn't needed for the type of inspection work that we're being asked to do during construction. So we're really working around the limits of current technology and what's practical in the field. The 3D part of our project is really focused on break lines that we pass to contractors for bidding and use in development of the project and project phasing throughout the project. When we talk to contractors and we meet with them pretty regularly, we have a working group with them. They gave us the feedback that they would like to see consistently on every project a set of break lines. So that's what we've done. We're also using the pay items, and the reason we're focusing on the pay items is really this design to construction. If we were looking at this project from if this work was if we're coming at this from a different direction, we might not be using pay items, but pay items are what is most important to construction, and that's what we're planning to pass. So when I say that, we have our design file, the designer's design, and then we're going to break that out by pay item and deliver it as a for information only file so each pay item is organized on a separate level. That makes it easy for the contractors to consume and use in their software. It also makes it easy for us to produce the GIS services that we need for field tools. So this project or this work that we're doing with our A grant is really focusing on requirements-driven as-built data. So we're redefining how we think about as-builts. For years, we've received plan sheets that were just marked up at the end of a project, and with the switch from sheets, moving away from sheets to passing the design files and going fully digital with our work, we're getting back DGNs that basically haven't even been edited. So we're supposed to receive DGNs at the end of the file, at the end of the project that show where things were actually placed. We're keeping designers engaged throughout the project so we get that information back, hoping we can push it back into our asset repository, but we have not been able to do that because we aren't receiving it. So we're looking at a new way to collect what's needed from construction that may not be a full plan set at the end that's marked up, but just be the pieces of information that we need. And we're focusing on signs, striping, guardrail, and barrier in this first phase. So traffic and safety provided us a list of attributes that they wanted for signs, striping, guardrail, and barrier, and we built those into our process so that they can begin being populated into our geodatabase during the construction phase. Okay, so creating GIS data and using GIS data, the GIS field tool. So now I'm moving into what's really happening with GIS in this project, because it's a lot about CAD and it's a lot about 3D models and passing information from design to construction. I've talked a lot about all of that, but what we're really doing is validating our CAD standards have been followed. This has been a big problem for, I don't know, maybe forever, but certainly for my entire career at the DOT, which only spans 8 years. We have struggled to have our CAD standards followed, and the reason this is important is because we can't extract anything from the CAD file for GIS if the standards are not followed. If every design is done differently every time, it makes it very difficult for us to create repeatable processes. So what we're doing here is using GIS to create that validation. So you're using FME to validate that the CAD standards were followed, and to push data into GIS so that it can be used in the field for inspection. We have 4 FME models, one that will validate the standards, one that checks that polygons are closed. We have a lot of use of our design data for project PI, and it currently requires the analyst to go in and close all the polygons. We're making that part of our design process, that once the design is done, the designer will create the closed polygons for use in PI. We're using a FME to check the pay items, to validate that the pay items exist in our MMP, and that they can be passed forward, separated out into different levels for contractors to use, and then convert it to GIS for use in the field. So what we're validating on our CAD standards is level, line style, color, and line weight. This FME tool basically checks that the standards were followed and then reports out any inconsistencies, so the designer can go back and fix them before we get too far into the project. It also cross-checks all the pay items from the DGN to GIS to validate that our design scripts are working. We're using Collector and Survey 123 today, and this is an older presentation, right? We were going to do this a couple months ago, and we will still be using Collector and Survey 123, but our current focus is on a web app builder tool that will focus on daily quantities and produce reports for construction to document what was delivered and accepted. A dashboard will be a part of this project too. So the issues that we've run into. CAD issues, we have Bentley is just unstable, just generally unstable. I've used Esri tools for a long time, and I've always run into issues there. There are issues everywhere in software. Bentley, we're struggling with it being unstable. They change their tools all the time. The tool that we began this project using, basically they deprecated it and decided to do something, go in a completely different direction. I think it's the right decision for them. We're seeing that the new tool we're getting some positive feedback on it. It's certainly better than the old tool for design review, but it doesn't do anything in the field. GIS is really picking up for our field work, and I think that's where we're going to see the wins, is using it in construction. But it is, like I said, limited to 3D. And the biggest challenge that we've had, one of the biggest challenges, is that we can't break linear features using out-of-the-box technology. We are working with Esri on the collector enhancements. We're beta testing the snapping. We're also working with Bentley. We just did a test with their iTwin design review, and we really like that. We're pushing them very hard to bring back WFS service abilities. Several years ago, you could bring in the services. So we have a lot of services, over 100 data layers at UDOT that we would like to be able to access and view and design and understand at the beginning of a project. And we could do that in the past, and you cannot do it today. They say it's 2 years out on their roadmap, so we're looking at some other options to make that happen. We're leveraging GIS in this to support digital delivery using hub sites. So if you want any more information about what we're doing with digital delivery, with GIS areas of the aspects of this project, anything really, or how to contact us, you can go to digitaldelivery.udot.utah.gov. We have training resources there. We're building out centralized training. And it's really gives you some insight into a strategy for our future. So what we're really, this whole AID grant is about preparing to leverage advancing technology, updating our workspace, building consistent processes. That's really huge. And that accountability piece, I think that is both welcomed by our contractors and by our designers, but it's going to create some rub. I mean, it's disruptive technology, right? To start checking that CAD work as soon as it comes in, but it will have long-standing benefits for GIS as the data will come in much more seamlessly. Gathering as-built requirements is new. Thinking of as-built not just as the sheet, but as something that goes right into our system and can be used is a big change. And that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Becky. Are there any questions for Becky? Please feel free to type them in. You can enter a question at any time during a presentation. We'll read it at the end. I just want to take some questions now while you're thinking about this. If there are any, I'm just going to give a minute, and I'm going to change the presenter over to me and share my screen. And do you have a question? There's a comment that the site is not working at Digital Delivery UPN opened.
Yes, we've improved the name, so you could just go Digital Delivery. That's an old slide from 2 months ago. The new URL is digitaldelivery.udot.utah.gov.
So, Reynold, why don't you check that URL that Becky just read out, digitaldelivery.uplan.utah.gov.
.udot.utah.gov.
Okay. And then I do have a couple questions for you. What format are you providing 3D break lines to the field?
We're actually providing them as a DGN, a separate DGN with specific naming conventions that can be found in that digital delivery, on the digital delivery site.
Okay. And are you using iModals and Survey123/Collector for inspection?
iModels?
iModels, yes.
So we used iModels on some. We have used iModels in the past. We are not using them on our current projects. We're focusing on using Collector and Survey123. Actually, a web app. We're investing in a web app tool that will extend the capabilities of what exists today in Collector and Survey123 for use in the field.
Okay.
And we're using R2s to tighten up the accuracy, and we're getting really highly accurate data. And
okay.
In fact, it's so tight that we've received a question from construction: does it even need to be that? Do we even need that accuracy, or can we begin just snapping in the field to the design?
Okay. We have another question. Have you tested CAD GIS integration utilizing Autodesk Map 3D, also utilizing ArcGIS Pro and WebScene geodatabase environment?
We are exploring opportunities with Autodesk, but we're currently at Bentley Shop. So that, I guess the short answer is yes, we're looking at all options and we are working with them.
Okay. And it looks like that concludes our questions so far, but if you have more questions for Becky or think of them as you go, I'm sure she's going to stick around till the end of the webinar. And if you have questions for Adrian during Adrian's presentation, please feel free to type them in so that we'll hit the ground running. I'm going to turn it over to Adrian now to talk about e-ticketing for HMA and PCC.
Cool, thanks. Let me just get this presenting here.
Perfect.
All right, my name is Adrian Sellers, and I work in the GIS group here. And this is a little project about kind of a lot of the work I did this past spring and summer on electronic ticketing, mostly for HMA, and piloting some projects for concrete paving as well. So why we have this initiative, it is tough for us to have so much paper and scanning documents. Our executive director, Carlos Viceres, has top 10 goals every year, and his number 6 goal is to be the first DOT in the nation to become paperless. So this helps with that, but that's not really the great reason of why this initiative has the meaning to it. For us, it is a better way of record keeping for our pavement tickets, and also a way for us to get asset management to get a location for each of these tickets out there. So we kind of think about the paving that we do. In 2019 alone, we did 1.4 tons of asphalt paving. That's about 70,000 tickets, which would be about 140,000 pieces of paper. So when you think about how thick a ream of paper is, that would be almost 23 feet tall of paper that we accept every year. And the current process that we use is the office managers will scan in these tickets and put them into ProjectWise for documentation, and also put them into Excel sheets to kind of manage their quantities as well. So this would be a huge reduction in work for them. And then again, asset management, 1.4 million tons of asphalt is about $100 million in asphalt. So that's one of our largest assets at the DOT. So it would be good to know if we could know where each truck dumped that load of HMA. So as we move along here, what we did was go to our suppliers and voluntarily ask if they would like to participate in this e-ticketing program. There was a lot of hesitation from the asphalt industry, thinking that we were looking for more information than what you see here on a paper ticket, and that we would kind of use this extra information to hang them. But that was not our approach to it. All the information that we wanted to get electronically is what you see on a paper ticket here. So as you're looking throughout these, some of the important stuff in these highlighted fields, what plant it's coming out of, its order, where it's going, the product, and kind of the quantity associated with the product.
Sorry to interrupt you, Adrian. Becky, can you put yourself on mute?
So, as our state construction engineer, Josh, went down the road of looking at how we can actually do this, there are a couple different options available. There's commercial software. There's stuff out there that is commercially available for electronic ticketing. I think one's called Trackit. There's a couple different software vendors out there. Command Alcon has their own product as well. But for that, it would be requiring us to put equipment in the vehicles, the contractors' vehicles. It's a fairly expensive solution at about, $20 a truck to use those units, plus the cost to set up each HMA plant to be able to transmit to their systems. So there was a lot of pushback trying to get that one going. So we decided to try and come up with our own solution using our own software that we have here today. So what we ended up using is Safe Software's FME and FME Server, and some Esri products that we also have here. So we kind of went down the road of using software that we already owned, and this way we can kind of tailor the end user experience for our inspectors that we could have control of that and kind of just give them one consistent view. So as paper ticket, and this will get related to GIS at one point, I promise, but as a paper ticket, kind of the life cycle that it usually runs is the ticket's generated, the truck is dispatched out of the hot plant, the truck arrives on a project, either there is someone from the contractor collecting all the tickets who then gives them to the inspector, or UDOT's actual inspector runs up to the truck, grabs the ticket from the driver. Then the UDOT inspector adds his additional information on there, such as what time it arrived. He signs the ticket saying that he received it. He may take a temperature on that asphalt to make sure it's within our specification. And then he ends up at the end of the day, returns all these tickets to the office manager who associates them with the payment item. So kind of our idea for electronic ticketing was a little bit of a different workflow. So how we wanted to do this was the ticket's generated in the system at the plant. When the truck is dispatched, kind of when the plant operator hits the print ticket, a payload URL is sent some JSON over to our FME server. Once it gets to the FME server, it is extracted, transformed, and loaded into a Esri geodatabase. And here is then where we can use Survey123 and the inbox function, so the inspector can actually view the ticket digitally. He completes his inspection form on that ticket, which then updates the information in our geodatabase. And then from there, the office manager can extract what information they need out of our GIS and associate that and do some sums and associate that with line payment. And we've also been working on some future functionality of being able to send some real-time QA and QC results back to the contractor. So when we looked at this project and looked at all the stuff on the ticket, we pretty much wanted everything that was on the ticket to go into our GIS system. And some additional information that we add on there was making sure that we had a place so the inspector could say that they have visually verified or not visually verified the ticket. We were kind of using that as our saying that the inspector was there and the inspector accepted it. And the additional information that we added on there was the temperature, like I was saying, if they're taking a sample off that load, if they had to reject that load, and if they did have to reject that load, about how much did they think they rejected, and any notes from the inspector. And then again, we're using Survey123 to try and grab a point at the beginning of the wind row. So we can actually kind of now start to extrapolate a little bit of information about where this asset actually lives. So another key part, looking back at the paper ticket, and we did have to have some discussions about this with the plant operators, was getting the vehicle ID on there. So for this one, it's MAT1106. So we thought about trying to use license plates, and then we kind of thought about maybe we can put QR codes on the trucks. But with the amount of trucks that they use from third parties, a lot of times for hauling, it was really kind of infeasible. So we asked them to just use the truck number on the side of the truck. So if it's a lease truck, if it's one of the contractor's actual trucks, it would be kind of an easy way to identify everything. So now getting a little bit more into like kind of the technical aspects of the workflow. Through these series of symbols that don't really mean anything, this is how we kind of got everything to work. So the black circle is the JSON getting sent from the supplier. We send it over to our FME server. From there, it goes into ArcGIS Online and onto our Enterprise Geodatabase. It also sends that line of information over to a Google Sheet, which we have shared with the contractor, and then Survey123 to kind of finish everything out and get the extra information. So looking at the JSON, we pretty much ask them, just give it to us in whatever format you can, and we will work with that. Just we want to get anything, and however you guys can get it to us, we will work with it. But it turns out a lot of these plants all run the same JWS database for their ticketing operations. So most of the tickets we got all came across in the same format. So this is all the information that you would need off a paper ticket, just in a JSON format. So on the FME part of this, we set up a REST endpoint on the FME server, and then we created our workflows on FME desktop and upload them to the server. So we have our workflows that are ready to take that JSON and ETL it. And then on the FME server, we're able to create topics that are monitored by that REST endpoint. So whenever a feature hits our FME server, it just throws it into our Enterprise Geo database and onto ArcGIS Online. So it's a near real-time solution, and a lot of the time the inspectors are seeing these tickets show up on their mobile devices before the trucks even get there, which is kind of cool. So on the Survey 123 side of things, we set up individual apps for each project, or individual surveys for each project within there. So how it would work is the inspector would choose the project that they're working on, and then they would hit the inbox feature. The inbox would then query our Geo database for any tickets in there that are matching the order number for that project, and also tickets that have null on the visually verified part. So that just should allow that if they're keeping up with their tickets, they should only see new tickets in that interface. So then they go on here and they can see the truck number, the name of the project, and the time that the truck was dispatched. Then they can choose the correct ticket for the truck that they're seeing on the project. And so on Survey 123, pretty simple. We just had a drop down at the top that showed the ticket information, the same stuff you'd see on your paper ticket. And then below that, where they can add their own information. So for item numbers, if there was only one item number for the project, we would pre-populate that. If there was more than one item number for project, say they had different type of HMA for approaches or side streets versus what they're using for mainline paving, we could have those different item numbers in there. We're also pre-populating the pin fields, so they don't have to worry about putting that in. And then kind of the important part was the visually verified delivery, which is a required field, so that it can pull it off of that inbox, and then the rest of the information. And then we were asking them to, if they can and if it's safe, to go to the beginning of the windrow and grab a location as well. So from that, we can kind of get a pretty cool web map looking at how the paving is moving along a project. So this is out here in East Canyon, just outside of Salt Lake City. So we can kind of see the tickets moving along, 337, 347, 352, 404. So you can kind of see that run of paving. So we can, from there, if something down the road and we need to figure out why this pavement's failing, we can kind of look and see, well, here's the mix design, and here's what they put down, look at the temperatures, and maybe see if we can get some good information from that. And so here's out playing with this application, and this is the location that you saw in the previous web map out in East Canyon. And another part of this that was very handy to the contractor was using a Google Sheet. So we just, a lot of the contractors didn't want to have to get an ArcGIS Online login, and they just really wanted to see the tabular information. So we sent it over to a Google Sheet as well, and gave each contractor kind of access to their own sheet for what's going on. So some of the foremen and stuff were using this, so they were able to actually to keep up and see how much was getting paved that night without having to call up their foreman on the job each night. So this is pretty nifty for them. In the future, for this year, we have planned moving this over to operations dashboards instead. So we can have operations dashboards set up for each contractor where they can kind of query their own information and export it to an Excel sheet. So this is a slide that when we usually present this, that we have our good friend Scott Fernald from Granite Construction, who helped out a lot with this project. This is a slide that he made for our annual conference. So the benefits to him were that he could get near real-time quantities. So he can just log on and he can see visually where they're paving at, and he can kind of visually and tabularly see those sums of how much is getting put on the ground. Also to get itemized delivery information, being able to see the truck number and kind of notes from the inspectors and how much is getting put down was super helpful. And then he was kind of using this to figure out cycle times for his paving crews. So better information for the contractor so they can actually see how long it's taking their trucks to get from the plant to when they're actually placing the asphalt on the ground. So some of the concerns we've had with this project are, how is this going to work when the supplier is not the prime contractor? So all these projects we've piloted so far, the supplier has been the prime, but we believe we can still make it work the same way in the future if they have kind of a subcontractor bringing the materials, as long as we are able to coordinate with the subcontractor ahead of time. And another thing that we can't get around is bypassing ports of entries. In the Utah code, it is required that a paper ticket to show how much you're carrying and where it's coming from, it has to be on the driver if they want to bypass a port of entry. So this really wouldn't be a good solution for projects that you find out near our borders, which is pretty rural areas, so we don't really see that too much. Then another thing we're running into is kind of how to scale this up, looking at ways that we can possibly script the creation of these surveys, and looking at ways that the contractor can send us a JSON when the project is created in their system, so they could just send us a row of data saying, here's the order number, here's the project name, and then we could use that to try and automate and set some of this stuff up. And then another problem we've also kind of run into is, how is this data best serving people at UDOT? So for a lot of these projects, it was just seeing what we can get out there and what we can make happen. So kind of trying to think about our data governance in the future and guidelines and SOPs for how we want this to run. So as of today, we've done 7 projects with Granite Construction. It's about 2,900 paper tickets that we were able to get electronically and about 70,000 tons of asphalt. We've had 1 project with Staker Parson, and so we're looking to collaborate with them a lot more this next construction season, and we're ready to go. We've also been receiving PCC tickets from Geneva Rock Products. We haven't actually used these tickets on projects yet, but we have been receiving these tickets and trying to figure out kind of the best way that we want to model concrete paving versus HMA, since it's a lot more information that we're getting across with that. And then we've also been thinking about integration with a company called Build It. We don't want to exclude any kind of mom and pop paving operations. So by trying to integrate with a third party that will be able to help these smaller paving shops be able to integrate with kind of the system that we're looking to place enterprise. And that's all I have for you today. Sorry if I talked really fast there.
I heard all the words. Thank you, Adrian. That was a very interesting presentation. Are there questions for Adrian on this presentation on e-ticketing? We'll just give people a minute to get their fingers warmed up so they can type in a question or two if they would like to. And of course, if Becky or Adrian have any questions for each other, now would be a good time to ask them. Oh, there is. Mark says, it's very impressive stuff. Are there any concerns about security with sharing the Google Sheet, Adrian?
Yeah, so the contractors were concerned about seeing each other's data. you know, if one contractor can know the other contractor's cycle times and kind of figure out that information, that could lead them to be um, a little leaner on their bid if they really had some kind of previous data for a project in that area. So with the Google Sheets, we just shared them for exclusively for contractors so they couldn't see each other's information. And in the future, we would like to move to dashboards where, and we'll kind of secure those through groups using Portal so that only members of that contractor's team would be able to see their own data.
Okay. Then the next question is related. Who owns the Google Sheets and controls sharing of the Google Sheets? So,
I own the Google Sheet. I control the sharing to it as of now, which probably isn't the best practice in the future going forward, being that I'm just one person who has to kind of manage all of this stuff at once.
Do you have any ties to the 3D model for this data?
Currently, no. No ties to the 3D model. It would be great if we could kind of tie this back to the paving lots. I think that would be a really great use of this as well, to tie all that information together.
Yeah. Do you assign one username for AGOL, or do the companies have AGOL login names?
So currently the companies were just using the Google Sheet, and our UDOT inspectors are the ones signing into ArcGIS Online. So a couple years ago, we signed an enterprise license agreement with Esri, so we have a lot of users that we're able to give to our inspectors. We have also just purchased Hub Premium from Esri. So with Hub Premium, we have a bunch of accounts that are not locked down to our Active Directory. So for third-party inspectors, we've been having them create a Hub account, and then we've been adding them into our UDOT groups to be able to get them to be able to log in and use the surveys.
And what about when you go to Ops Dashboard?
It'll be the same way. We'll probably, I'm kind of opposed to having general users, and I would prefer to have named users. So we'll probably just give a named user to whoever at the contractor needs access to this.
Great. Well, it looks like those are all the questions we have for both of you today, and I want to thank you both for very interesting presentations. I'm going to take this back. Show my screen. And move on to the next slide. We've already sort of gotten past it, the Q&A. I just wanted to give a little, look at this, I didn't change the slide from last time. These are the wrong presenters, so I'll update that before I post this to web PowerPoint online. But if you have any desire to give a webinar, or if you have any, oh, there is one more question for you, Adrian. Where did you use to store the work orders?
I'm sorry, could you say that again? Store the what?
The work orders, where do you store the work orders?
Oh, so the tickets themselves are just stored in a layer on our Enterprise GeoDatabase.
Okay. So again, thank everyone for participating. This webinar has been recorded. We're going to publish it together with the presentations that Becky and Adrian gave, and this PowerPoint presentation once I put the right information on who the presenters were, not last time's webinar, but this time's webinar. And I hope you join us again next month on the first Wednesday of the month for a sneak preview of the capability, maturity of GIS systems at the states, which is what we're going to be featuring for our next webinar. And hopefully we'll see a lot of you at the GIST conference coming up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Registration is open for that conference, and that'll be April 14th to 17th. And I'm sure there are going to be some interesting sessions on online uses of GIS. So hope to see you there. Thanks so much for coming. Oh, there is one more question. Is it feasible to include ports of entry in the life cycle of the e-ticket process?
I think if they were able to change Utah code, we could get around the ports of entry. But the current way that it's written, it is required that if they need a paper ticket.
Okay. Thank you, Adrian. If anyone has any more stray questions that they think of, feel free to email them to me at pweinberger@ashto.org, and I will forward them on to Adrian or Becky, whoever they're addressed to, and I'm sure they will answer you directly by email. And that concludes today's GOTUG webinar. Thank you all for participating.